Hello guys, welcome back to another video, first video of 2024. January is always a bit of a strange month for me. I try to maybe take a bit of a break, but also plan out what I want to do this year. Some of that involves upgrades to this shack, so I thought now was a perfect time to answer some of your questions that you guys have been posting over the last 6 months since we put out the series about building the shack. I've picked out 10 of them, there have been quite a few more, but we'll address those at the end of the video. So first question is, the overall rough size of the shack is about 3.6 meters wide by about 2.4 meters deep. Well, 2.3 technically at this side, slightly smaller at this side. It's not a straight shape. It's about 7 foot high at the front and it slopes down to about 6.5 foot at the back. So it's quite a bit bigger than my old shack. As always, I could probably do with it being double the size, but the more space you have, the more space you fill. So it has been quite good at making me pick and choose what I keep in the shack and what I keep in storage elsewhere. Okay, question number 2. Now, I did my research before I built it. Obviously I don't want to do anything that's going to break the law and end up causing me any issues. With that being said, I'm not a professional, so if you're not sure about your area, planning's different in every single council, never mind country, so check with your own professionals. But the overall area of the shack is under 10 square meters. It's lower than 8 feet high or 2.4 meters high, and it's not technically a permanent structure. There's no foundations or anything have to go in for it, so all of those things I think make it qualify that it doesn't need planning permission. Plus, realistically, it's no different than building a shed in your back garden, so but do consult your own planning consultants. From previous experience dealing with them, they tend to be quite honest. They're not going to try and hardball you or catch you out with anything. If you phone up, give them the dimensions of it, roughly where it's going, they're usually quite happy to say whether it does or doesn't need permission. Right, next question. So the festoon lights actually came with the rest of the electrics for the shack. My cousin's an electrician, so he was actually able to get them for me from his electrical wholesalers. I will link below similar versions that I've found on Amazon if you want to check them out. They come with a 3-pin plug. They are extendable, so you can link multiple sets together with only one plug. Plus they have replaceable bulbs. That's the one thing I wanted. I didn't want fixed bulbs so that whenever one went out you couldn't replace it. Absolute nightmare. Those are held in with tensioning wires, so they're little strainers with cables just to hold the weight. Whenever they're spanned over quite a few meters distance, they can sag down in the middle, so these keep everything nice and tight. Plus the wires of the actual lights aren't taking the strain, so I would definitely recommend those as well. But all of that will be linked in the description box below. Right, next up. So the roof is from a company called Amari Plastics over here in Northern Ireland. I think they have a sister company down in Ireland as well, but I'll leave a link to them in the description box below. They do all kinds of roofing solutions, but this was the 10mm opal effect polycarbonate, so they do it in clear and white as well. The sheets I went for were 3 meters by 1 meter wide. You can buy them in all different sizes, or you can get custom sheets made as well. Plus they do all the fixtures etc to fit it, so I'll leave a link for them in the description. I'm super happy with the quality of the roof. That brings us on to our next question. We're working with a much larger roof than I had in my last shack. If it is a light rain shower, there is barely any noise. I have been able to actually shoot videos in here with light rain. I couldn't have done that in my old shack. If it's an absolute pour down, then yes, it is loud. It sounds like a drum, but in those situations I'm not going to be recording anyway, so it's fine. It keeps me dry to actually cook in here, but shooting videos is probably a no-no. I wouldn't say it's loud to the point where it annoys you to stand under here and cook, but definitely it's not silent. But I don't believe any roof is. Overall, I'm happy with the roof. It has developed 1 or 2 little drips, but I think they're coming from the little rubber bungs that you used to hold it down. They maybe just need popped out and a little bit of silicone put in around them and put back down again. But I need everything bone dry before I can get up and do that. So I have had more condensation in this shack than I had in my old one, which I was quite surprised with because airflow through this one is much better. There's no air getting trapped up in this area. It kind of can flow right through the shack. It might just be down to like our location where we've moved to. We are closer to a body of water, so maybe it's just slightly damper air. I don't know. It doesn't cause me too many issues. Once the fire's lit or a barbecue's lit, it heats everything up under here and it all dries out fine. Now, one more question about the roof. Short answer to this one is no, not really. If we reference back to the old shack, the KJ used to sit under it and it was much closer to it, so I would say the KJ from the control tower to the roof in the old shack was probably maybe 3 feet or so, maybe slightly under it. and I never had any issues with heating it. I was able to flip the control tower wide open and have sort of the heat just directly up onto the roof. It does get warm, but it never gets warm to the point where it's going to melt. This shack roof is slightly heavier, plus it is further away from the heat source, so for something like a Kamado Joe, I'm not overly worried with it. If I was to bring in something like a pizza oven that had a chimney that was direct and straight up onto that roof, then I would potentially push it outside or work out some kind of system to put the flue out through the wall. But for now, I'm happy. I tested it out at the start, and whenever I figured out it was okay, it's never crossed my mind again. Okay, let's talk about the other main material in this shack. So OSB is weatherproof to a degree. I think it has a certain number of years that it will last if it's just kind of put out on its own. Overall, I think it is a really good material to use for your shack. It's a lot cheaper than plywood is. It still has good durability. There's certain things I wouldn't use it for. So, and the backboards here, these are well protected. The back of them, there's quite a good overhang on the shack, so any rain that's coming down, unless it's coming completely sideways, it doesn't really get in there. I've checked in behind this wall quite a bit, and it is bone dry. There's a fence that kind of protects it as well. So these sheets are holding up fine. They haven't changed since the day I put them in. The end of the shack's a bit more exposed. I'll stick up some clips of it, but even it's fine. It has weathered, so the colour's all gone out of the OSB, but it hasn't started to swell up or get overly wet or damp. Anything that does get wet and it dries out really fast because it's vertical and it's protected by that overhead lip. Where I have had issues though are on the front bench. I did mention in the series that this was only a temporary measure. This is the old cart from my old shack. Because I wasn't so sure what I was going to do with the front of this, or with this bench at the front, I decided just to repurpose it and cover it with a bit of OSB. You can see from the video clips, because this kind of sits half in and half out of the shack, it's on wheels, so I do try and move it in as much as I can. However, the bit that kind of sits out to the front has all swole up, it's discoloured, it's wet, it's ugly looking. It's still structurally fine, and once it dries out in the summer, I'll hit it with sand and oil it all again, should be fine. But it's definitely not a long-term solution, so that is one of the tasks I want to tackle coming into this year. So something more permanent put at the front. I just can't decide what. So happy to take your suggestions in the comments below. It's definitely puzzling me at the minute. But for anything that's going to be overly exposed to rain, and definitely something that's sitting sort of flat like this and the water can't run off it fast, I wouldn't suggest using OSB for it. Plywood wouldn't fare much better, so I don't believe it's a downfall of the OSB. It's just not the purpose it's designed for. There was a question asking about the paint for the shack. It's just standard masonry paint I've used. You can generally get the paint guys to mix up any colour you want. That does, there's no preservatives in it, but it does weatherproof the OSB to a certain extent as well. So I'm hoping that it lasts as long as the old shack did. I never had to repaint it. But even at the edges of the shack where it might get a little bit of rain blowing in, those boards are all still fine because that paint protects it so well. Right, let's take a question about one of the things I'm actually most happy with this shack. So the stove is from a brand called RB73, but I actually got this from Creative Gardens, the company I work for. This is one of the things I was most worried about. They're an expensive stove, but they're expensive for a reason. They're built like tanks. This thing will probably outlast me. It was a big investment to put in, however, I'm so glad I did it. I've tried a couple of different ways of heating the shack in the past with smaller chimneys. They're the ones that cut the chimney off about 6 feet right at eye level, and if I'm standing shooting videos and there's just smoke billowing in, the fireboxes are often far too small in them to get a good fire going. A firebowl is fine, but again, it's not ideal for shooting videos and having any kind of smoke blowing in round. This is a massive chimney, really big firebox, so you can get a good heat going in there. Because it is made of such heavy grade steel as well, once this thing kind of comes up to temperature, it radiates heat off for such a wide radius around it. A lot of other like chimneys, etc. I've had before, you have to stand really close to them, or if it's an electric heater, you almost need to be right underneath it to get the benefit of it. Whereas this, sitting here, it's kind of, what, 6-7 feet away from my main bench, and I can still feel the heat coming off it. Plus it throws heat under the roof of the shack and it kind of builds up in there as well. So I'm over the moon with this. This thing has performed so well. I will link the Creative Gardens page below with the range of them on it. You can have a look at them, but they do smaller ones if you don't want to put anything this size in. If you have a smaller shack or a smaller area, you can definitely go for them, or they do bigger ones. Some of them are beasts, but rather than spending £200 or £300 for things that aren't going to last or maybe don't perform as well, save your money up and buy something that is going to last and do the job. I'm not sure I could live without this thing now. Next question. So once again, I store my cast iron in a very similar way I did to the old shack. It wasn't quite as big, so it might have been slightly more sheltered. In here, these don't get wet from the rain, but I have noticed that they have started to rust over a little bit. Now, it's nothing more than surface rust, and it's the kind of thing, before you use it, if you give it a quick scrub in a sink with a bit of soapy water, it takes it all off. I wouldn't say I'm worried about it, but you can see that this one here is fine because I use it the most. Some of the other little ones that I don't use as often have started to develop. Again, I think it's maybe just the damp air. I'm not worried about it. If they start to get really bad, then I'll store them somewhere else. For now, it's just handy to have them sitting out here. If you are overly fussy about it, don't store them outside, don't store them hanging up. I'm going to go with convenience over that protection or being overly sentimental about them. Good quality cast iron can handle a little bit of surface rust. It cleans off fine. You can bring it back around really fast, so not bothered about it. That only leaves one question to answer, and it's probably the one I get asked the most out of all of them. All right, the big question. Not one you maybe want to total up. You always have an idea in your head what you're going to spend on it, and whatever that idea is in your head, you can probably double it. I have figures. So paving for the area, you may or may not need to do it, but the paving was 550 quid. I saved a lot of money by laying it myself. If you had to pay somebody else to do that, that would probably almost double the price. There is like stones and drainage and all the rest of it. I didn't include any of that in the actual shack cost. If you already have hard standing to build on, then you probably don't need to include the paving cost either. Timber was around £400. I believe it might have been slightly more than that. I think I had to run back and get a few bits and pieces just to finish off some of the countertops. We need to get extra OSB. Can't quite remember, but I would say £400 to £450 for timber. The other thing I will mention is the price of timber fluctuates quite a lot. Whenever I was buying it, it was coming down off a high, but it was still pretty high compared to what normal prices would be, as everything is these days. So don't take that one as gospel, but around 400, 450 quid should be plenty for timber. The roof sheets were 378 quid, so that was 4 sheets that were 3x1, and then the rails to go along with them. I saved a little bit of money by going and picking it up myself. They do deliver as well, but luckily I was able to get a van and I was able to go and pick it up. Electrics, you're probably looking 200 to 300 quid. Again, it just depends what you want. If you're just putting a single bulb in and one socket, it's obviously not going to cost that much. I did wire it all in myself with a little bit of advice from my cousin, obviously. He told me the safe way to do it. But I would say if you allow a couple of hundred quid, that should be plenty. It just depends how rich your tastes are. Again, that included the strip lighting, which I'm over the moon with. I think it works really well, or that little tape lighting around the edge, the LEDs. I was worried they weren't going to stick very well and they were going to end up falling off and causing problems, but they haven't budged. They seem to be working perfect so far, so long may it last. Then there's other things like about 100 quid done the guttering and stuff along the back of it. The cabinets from IKEA were around 100 quid. Most of the other stuff, I believe, like paint's another 50, 60 quid for a tin of it. I think that's probably about it. Time. The more you can do yourself, the more money you're going to save. If you have to pay somebody else to come and do it for you, you could almost double the price. So whatever it costs in materials, they're probably going to charge something similar in labour, at least to do a good job. If their price seems too good to be true, then it probably is too good to be true. Overall, I would say around £2,000 probably built the shack. It was expensive, but it's something I kind of factored into moving house, and we knew it was an area I was going to want and need. So we just put the money into it there and then, and I'm over the moon with it. So far, it has been really nice to cook in it. Plenty of space, plenty of prep space. The benches at the back are ideal. If I can just figure out something similar to do at the front, then I'll be happy enough. I do have an article on the website that details, probably in more detail, all the materials I used, dimensions, where the stuff came from. I've linked a lot of stuff on the likes of Amazon, etc. Just to give you an idea of examples of the kind of things I used. Like I say, a lot of the electrics and stuff came from an electrical wholesaler. You can probably go and get the same idea. If you're just looking at something simple off Amazon, I've linked similar items to it. I've linked all the stuff from Creative Gardens that we used, and there's a more sort of step-by-step details of how the shack was built and what everything else was used for. So I'll leave that link in the description below. There's a lot of links in the video description this week. I will also link the original series if you're not sure what exactly I'm talking about. There's a 4-part series of me actually building the shack, so if you haven't seen it yet, I will leave a link for that too. And if you have any more questions, leave them in the comments of this video, and if I need to, I'll make a part 2. There will be a future video coming of the upgrades I want to make to it this year. So I want to get the little drips in the roof fixed, and then figure out something to do at the front here that's going to withstand the weather. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video.